The reason why we're here today is, well, let's face it, it's the arbitrary and capricious nature of YouTube. We have a little dispute over them about a use of a video, and they have limited our live feature for a couple more days. So in an effort to get out there and be able to communicate with our subscribers and answer questions about cases that are going on in the media today, we have tried Facebook, and this is our first venture at it. So hopefully it'll be okay, and we won't have too many glitches. We've got Kyle here working behind the scenes to keep everything up and running. So, you know, if it goes down, it's still ultimately my fault. But if there's somebody that can fix it, it's no doubt Kyle. So we'll give it a few minutes here to see how many, for people to start coming here to the live chat, and then we'll kind of get into the subject matters that I want to talk about today. Now, obviously, the big case out there that I'd like to discuss is that of Gannon Stauch. Obviously, he's the young man from El Paso County, which is down in Colorado Springs, here in Colorado. His stepmother, Letitia Stauch, has been charged with his death, and she appeared in court late last week. And then it was reported yesterday that the remains of young Gannon were in fact discovered in Florida a couple of days ago, and they were trying to do some preliminary identifications as it relates to the body and notifying the family, etc. So obviously, all our thoughts go out to the family. I could not imagine losing a child. That's one of the worst things that any parent could possibly ever have to deal with, and probably questioning and second-guessing themselves as to what they should have done. And it's obviously not their fault, but it's clearly, a tragic situation all around. So I'd like to talk about that. And then another thing, and this is this is crime talk related, because I think a crime has been committed, and that is these four congressmen and women who were basically trading on insider information and dumping a bunch of stock. And I just want to touch on this. And, obviously we'll talk about Gannon Stauch as well as any other cases that people want to talk about. But I think this is worth mentioning because, these politicians want us to trust them, and everything that they do basically says we can't trust them. And then when we find out that they're trading on information that we don't have access to, but they're dumping their stock portfolios so that they don't lose money like the rest of us. And I don't know about you, but I looked at my stocks, and they're about 50% less than they were a couple of weeks ago. And if I had been told information, maybe I would have acted upon it. But these senators who acted upon it and saved themselves millions of dollars in losses, in my opinion, have violated what is referred to as the Stock Act, and it stopped trading on congressional knowledge. Basically, senators and congressmen cannot profit or prevent losing money based upon information they learn in their official capacity. I mean, this is what we call public service. And, I think that these people should work for literally $1 a year. We want successful people in office because they've proven themselves that they can do something. And successful people does not mean, I got elected to office. I mean, let's face it, both of these parties, the Republican and Democrat parties, if they were not writing the rules for themselves, they would be classified as, organized crime, criminal organizations. And they have this seniority system of the insiders pick who's going to be the next person in line to take the job. So I don't see that as being successful that you got elected to that. I want people that have been successful in business in their private life, and then they go and they do public service, and they work for $1 a year because they're not there for the money. They're not there to profit. And so when these senators get this inside information and do that, I think it's completely a betrayal, not only to the country, to their constituents, but everyone else that is out there. And so I want to talk about that as well. So anyway, let's talk about the Gannon Stauch case, and let's take comments, take questions from people here as well. Looks like I already got Alicia. Good evening from Ireland. I hope you all are doing well. Hopefully, everyone out there that is self-quarantining or sheltering in place because basically they're told they have to, are doing okay. Hopefully we can help you get through that process as well. So let's talk about, like I said, we'll kind of reset here because we have some more people that have shown up on our live podcast here on Facebook. And as I stated, this will be recorded and uploaded back on YouTube. I know a lot of people don't like Facebook. I get it. And like I said, I prefer YouTube to actually do these as well. However, like I said, YouTube in their arbitrary and capricious manner has taken our ability to go live for a little while longer, and it's rather frustrating because somebody can say, oh, you used a video, and we can't respond to it, and they just simply say you can't do something. Like I said, if anybody there that works at YouTube would like to, reach out to us, we'd appreciate it because we can't get any response from anybody, and it's just absolutely frustrating. So, like America dealing with this coronavirus and the world, we're not going to just sit back and take it. We're going to find another way to make it work. That's what makes us great. That's what makes the world great, is we solve problems. We just don't say, "Oh, YouTube won't let us go live," or YouTube won't let us go live, so we just can't do anything. Oh yeah, there's always a solution to the problem, and we are trying to find that solution until they would like to let us back on the air, so to speak. So let's, like I said, kind of reset there. So the Gannon Stauch case. Obviously, this is the young man. He was reported missing from Colorado Springs. Let's go through the timeline. So just kind of as a reset, Letitia Stauch is the stepmother of Gannon Stauch, and she has been charged now with first-degree murder, child abuse resulting in death, tampering with a deceased body, tampering with physical evidence, and then several crimes of violence charges, basically saying that a deadly weapon of some type was used to cause the death of Gannon Stauch. Now, this case, goes back, obviously, to January. January 27th, Gannon Stauch's stepmom, Letitia, reports Gannon missing. And Letitia reportedly told investigators that Gannon was last seen in the afternoon as he left to go to a friend's house. And the El Paso County Sheriff's Department that was investigating this case originally classified or labeled Gannon as a runaway child. Now, early on, Letitia Stauch, the stepmother, was considered a prime suspect, and that makes sense. In most of these cases, the last person that saw them is the individual that may have the most information. It just kind of makes sense. Now, as you recall, down in Houston, why can't I? Heidi Broussard case of the missing child. Everybody jumped on the bandwagon to say that the husband was responsible. He was the last one to see them, not and it turned out not to be the case at all. So we have to kind of sit back. In this case, obviously with Gannon Stauch, it's a little more interesting because of the location of the body being found, and I think it's interesting, but we'll talk about that as well. So 3 days later, on January 30th of 2020, the El Paso County Sheriff's Office decided to upgrade the investigation to a missing and endangered child case. And on January 31st, the El Paso County Sheriff's Office publicly asked for volunteers to register with the incident command team to coordinate search areas. And obviously, they started beginning search of the surrounding areas. February 1st, children in Gannon Larson Ranch neighborhood came together and had like a little prayer vigil for him, and obviously hoping for his safe return. On February 2nd, a neighbor of the Stauchs, Roderick Drayton, releases surveillance video. Boy, I can't talk this morning. Roderick Drayton releases surveillance video which reportedly shows Gannon's stepmom, Letitia, leaving with Gannon and then returning home without him. This video contradicts the initial statements that Letitia reportedly made to investigators, obviously. We've said this before, and I'll say it again. In a criminal investigation, the first story is never the truth, all right? If you've ever had small children and, they have crumbs around their face, and you say, "Did you take a cookie from the cookie jar?" They say, "No, I didn't." "Okay, are you sure? Because I see some crumbs around your face in the cookie jar. Looks like you took some cookies from the cookie jar." And then maybe the truth comes out that, the dog made him eat it or something along those lines. But the first story given to the police is never the truth, at least from the suspects sometimes, most of the time, because they don't know what they should tell or not tell. February 3rd, investigators from the El Paso County Sheriff's Office and crime lab technicians were spotted searching for evidence in the Stauchs family home. Now, obviously, when they send in these crime scene investigation teams, they're looking for anything of evidentiary value. They probably don't know what they're looking for. Obviously, they're looking for, is there any weapons? Are there any blood stains? Anything that would indicate possibly some type of a struggle or a fight or anything kind of just out of the ordinary. When you talk to crime scene investigators, sometimes it's quite obvious. They go in and there's a body and they look for it and there's a handgun next to the person. They know where they need to start looking. But sometimes you don't know what you're looking for, and particularly when a suspect resides there, or the person that they're searching, their home is the suspect. You don't know what you're looking for, and literally they have to go through every little nook and cranny to looking for things of evidentiary value. And whether there's a search warrant, then there's issues of, do they exceed the scope of the search warrant, or if there was a consent to search, was there a valid consent to search the house? These are all kinds of issues that, the defense will have to deal with later, and obviously the prosecution has to deal with early on. So February 28th, let me jump back there. So February 3rd, they searched the home of the Stauchs. February 5th, Gannon's father and biological mother released an emotional video plea for information related to Gannon's disappearance. This video plea was shared by local news outlets as well as the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. On February 28th, so 23 days later, some time had gone by. Obviously, the police had been working diligently. As we know, there's some 100 search warrants that were authored, reviewed, signed by a judge, and then executed. But February 28th, court records show investigators sought an arrest warrant for Letitia Stauch, Gannon's stepmom. March 2nd, the Sheriff's Department announced the arrest of Letitia Stauch. March 5th, she arrived in the El Paso County Jail and later that day appeared before her judge. The attorney waived the advisement until the first appearance. That date has now been set for April 14th. And as you may also recall, there was a little incident with Letitia Stauch on the way back from South Carolina where she slithered out of her handcuffs and literally physically attacked one of the El Paso County Sheriff deputies traveling with her. Obviously, we don't know exactly yet, but one would assume that she was attempting to escape. That's what they refer to as consciousness of guilt. And you can actually get an instruction. The prosecution can get an instruction which is referred to as the consciousness of guilt. It's called the flight instruction. And then if somebody is basically at a scene and they flee and they're caught somewhere later, you can try to use that as consciousness of guilt, because why would an innocent person run away is basically the basis for that particular instruction. Well, it could also be given in this particular case to show consciousness of guilt, because why would you try to escape if you knew you've done nothing wrong and you're confident that the legal system was going to unravel this big mistake that has apparently taken place? So that's where ultimately we stand. And then yesterday, the police announced that they'd found Gannon Stauch's body in Florida. And the police are actually asking for information, if anyone has any information, as to whether they saw or believe they could show that Miss Stauch was in the area where the body was found. Now, that seems like an unusual request at this point, given the fact that there's over 100 search warrants. I will bet you $1 that her phone, all the cell phone tower data has been applied for, requested, and retrieved. And it's interesting that they're asking for somebody to put her there if her phone is not showing that she was in that area. We'll have to wait and see. Now, obviously, she's the last person there. The question is, since the affidavits haven't been released, is what information do the police have that have led to the arrest of Letitia Stauch? We don't know exactly what it was, other than she's the last person with them. She says she's a runaway, that Gannon was a runaway. To look at it from the defense perspective, you think they're going to try to be able to show that she, in fact, was a runaway. Now, I've read some information that the father said the only thing really that he noticed is missing from the house was a suitcase. So the suitcase that was recovered, that apparently young Gannon was found in, obviously, was that from his house or was it another suitcase? Everyone's going to be looking for things to tie them to Letitia Stauch. Did she have help? How would she have got down to this part of Florida? Apparently, it's about a 21-hour drive from Colorado to Florida in this particular location where the body was found. Where was she? She kind of dropped off radar, at least here, for a while, and I don't know where she went. I'm sure the police know exactly where she went. If she was the prime suspect, I'm sure that they were monitoring her. For all we know, there could have been a GPS unit that a warrant was applied for and put on her car. Who knows? There could have been communications between her and her now husband, who is now filed for divorce, where she made admissions. Those are all admissible as it relates against her in court if anything like that was mentioned. And as always, and as a defense attorney, you would tell your client not to talk with anyone about the facts of this particular case because, simply put, anything you say can and will be used against you, taken out of context, misconstrued in some way. So the best thing to do is obviously not to talk. We will have to wait and see. I'm very anxious to see the affidavit for arrest warrant to see what information that they had that they thought ultimately led them with enough information to make an arrest versus, early on, other than simply she made contradictory statements that Gannon was going to a friend's house and then ring doorbell video shows that she's leaving with him in the car. And then even more intriguing is the big question of why. Why? It's unknown. I mean, obviously, there's been some reports that perhaps there wasn't a great bond between Letitia Stauch and Gannon Stauch, and obviously it's not her child. But still, I mean, it's a kid. I just never get this. And I've represented lots of people accused of child abuse, resulting in death and homicide of children. And, at the end of the day, you still have sitting there like, why couldn't you just pick on somebody your own child? You don't pick on a kid. Kids are there to be protected, whether it's your biological or your step child. I've said this before, and it's just tragic. I mean, it's a child. They have such a future, and to have something like that taken away, a child's future, it's just terrible. All right, so there's that. Let's see if we can answer some questions here that have come up. Stacy, Slithered is right. Yes, referring to Letitia Stauch getting out of her handcuffs while she was being transflored. So, Demarius, Florida did an autopsy, right? If so, when will the report be available? And is El Paso doing a second autopsy? It's my understanding that Florida has done initial identification procedures. I am not certain, so I'm not going to speculate as to whether they've done an autopsy. More than likely, normally the autopsy is done where the body is located. But it's not impossible for a second autopsy to be done. Now that the remains are done, are there, the body can be preserved. But more than likely, they'll want to do what they need to do as quickly as possible, so that the family can, do the body. The defense may want to be present. The defense may want to get their experts down there. But depending on the state of the body, and not to get too graphic, but depending on the state of the body, they'll be able to, do as many tests as possible as they can. I can tell you, I recently finished a case. It was a very bad case, but the state of the bodies were basically such that they were mummified, and so nobody could, in fact, determine the cause or manner of death. And they were basically trying to say, well, if somebody was at the property, you're responsible. We disputed that, because how can you say somebody's responsible when you can't determine a cause or manner of death? So the state of the remains will be a big factor in determining it. Now, obviously, if there is a gunshot or something along those lines, that will be quite evident, and they'll be able to determine the cause and manner of death. It just depends on those types of things that exist. And then I can tell you, in the particular case that I was dealing with, the remains were kept, and we actually had to have them shipped to an expert to conduct his own autopsy review in another state, and then the remains were shipped back as well. And in the meantime, obviously, they're not being given a burial of any kind, because they're evidence. There's something of evidentiary value. And, obviously, I think everybody was very, very cognizant of that fact that, these are the remains, and they need to be treated with dignity and respect, but you still need to do what you can do to, have the truth. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting case to watch. If the police cannot trace Lori, or if the police cannot trace Letitia Stauch to actually being in Florida, it actually helps the defense, but we don't know exactly what evidence they have. Then the question is did somebody help her, or how did she get around to doing this? Where was the body? Was it if and obviously she's given the presumption of innocence, but if, assuming that she is in fact guilty or did this, was the body stored somewhere? How did she get it and retrieve it when everybody's watching her? Or did somebody else do it? Or maybe he was, in fact, who knows? But the fact that she's seen on video leaving with him and not returning with him, you know, obviously the prosecution always has the burden of proving her guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and that burden never shifts to the defense. But it's going to be the kind of thing that jurors are going to say, hey, defense, give me a good explanation here. It's just regular human nature for people want to know. And, judges can tell the jury that the prosecution has to prove it. And juries, I think, are very profound and take their jobs very seriously when they're doing it. But they're human and they still want to know, like, hey, where'd you take that kid? And why didn't he come back with you? What happened in between? I'm sure that they've talked to all of his friends' friends and their parents. Did he come over? Did he not? And in the world of today's world with cell phone data, if they have her cell phone, they can see. It's amazing the amount of information that you can get from a cell phone. I think it would blow most people's minds. That literally when you drive down the street and it says, how it says, oh, there's a wireless connection that you could connect to. All that data is in fact collected. So they can literally track all your locations even without using a cell phone tower data information. All that information is captured on one's phone. And, if somebody turns it off, you really, even if you turn it off, it's still collecting data. It's amazing. And I think, that kind of technology is usually what is going to get somebody.
They want to know the body being found in Florida. Does that change where the trial will be?
That is a very good question. The question is the fact that the body was found in a different state, does that in fact change where a potential trial should be? And the answer is possibly yes. Okay. So you have two questions that come up there in that regard, and that is jurisdiction. All right. Florida would have to prove jurisdiction as it relates to Letitia Stauch that a crime was in fact committed there. Obviously, Colorado is saying that they have jurisdiction over her. Obviously, she lived here, she resided here, and they believe that the alleged murder, took place here. So they have jurisdiction. And then the question becomes, well, where should it be or where should it go? More than likely, it'll stay in Colorado, and evidence will simply be presented at trial that somehow the body was transported. But they could, in fact, try to move it to Florida if they had evidence that the crime actually occurred there. Now, you could be tried, in theory, in multiple jurisdictions. Normally it doesn't happen, but let's say, for example, you steal a car, let's say in Denver, and you drive across state lines and you are arrested in Kansas. You could be charged with the theft of that motor vehicle in both Kansas, where you're arrested, as well as where the crime took place. There would not be double jeopardy because, in theory, you have, well, not just in theory, but in reality, you have two separate sovereigns, two separate states prosecuting the same crime, but that is not necessarily illegal to do. Normally, one state will take the prosecution, and that will, in fact, be it. Or if they bring them back, they do something concurrent. In a homicide case, Florida will more than likely give deference to Colorado and let them proceed unless there's some information that the homicide actually took place in Florida. So I would plan on the case remaining here in the state of Colorado, El Paso County, but a lot of evidence as to where the body or how it was recovered And like I said, the prosecution has the burden of explaining how that body of young Gannon was in Florida, how it got there. It was discovered by road crews. Obviously, somebody threw that body. It looks like it's down in like a ravine or a ditch of some type, at least from the photos that I've seen. So the burden is going to remain with them. More than likely, the trial will stay here. I'd be very surprised if it moved. Most likely theory of the prosecution would be that it occurred here and the body was transported to hide the body somewhere in Florida. And that goes to what we've talked about previously when we talked about the Patrick phrasing matter. When you don't have a body, it's difficult. The case just got much better for the prosecution, and obviously they must have had some evidence that they thought that young Gannon was in fact deceased before they went forward with the charges. Now, another good question that I had the other day was the prosecution has added charges. Originally, it was first-degree murder. Now they've added the child abuse resulting in death younger than 12. How does that affect it? Well, there's what they're called different legal theories of prosecution. All right, so they've charged first-degree murder. Then they can charge child abuse resulting in death, someone under 12, position of trust, which is also a Class 1 felony. And the jury ultimately would have all of those options. It doesn't mean that she would be sentenced to, let's say if she was found guilty of first-degree murder and child abuse resulting in death, someone under 12, she wouldn't get two multiple life sentences. Those sentences would merge because it's based upon the same conduct, but it is the different theories of prosecution. You see that lots and lots of cases. You see multiple charges alleging the same conduct. Maybe a clear example would be is if a defendant is accused of shooting somebody. He could be charged, and the person survives. The defendant would be charged with attempted murder. They would be charged with first-degree assault, that they caused serious bodily injury, a break, a bone, a break, a fracture, a burn, a scar, some sort of permanent disfigurement, and the deadly weapon was used. They could also charge a lesser included offense of second-degree assault. The jury could, in theory, have to choose from all of those different options, and if there was a different element of each of one could be, not to get too in the weeds, but lesser included offenses as well, and the sentences would merge together. So the first degree assault and attempted murder, you would only be sentenced for one charge. They would be sentenced for each case, but they would merge because they're different theories of prosecution, and that's what the prosecutors in El Paso County are doing with Letitia Stauch by adding the first-degree murder as well as the child abuse. They're trying to say that either way, one way or the other, we're going to get you, and we really don't care what theory the jury will believe. Obviously, a district attorney has an ethical obligation to only take a case to trial if they believe they can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, and not just to take trial, but even charge it. They have to believe they can do that to all the charges. If not, they should dismiss them. And then the issue as it relates to these sentencing enhancers, crime of violence, that a deadly weapon was used, whether it was a gun, a knife, something along those lines, there must be some indication based upon the recovery of that body that warranted such a charge. Obviously, if there was a gunshot, was this young child, was he executed? If there a knife was used, we need to see that affidavit, because I don't want to get too far into the speculation zone. But based upon the charging documents, that's where it is. So hopefully that answered the question on jurisdiction, as well as the alternate theories that can come up there.
I guess too, they want to, can it be charged in federal court since it's taking a body across state lines?
the question is, would the federal government pick this case up and prosecute it since a body was moved across state lines? Very, very unlikely. The feds don't like to get involved in murder investigations unless they can show that it was on a federal reservation or federal property of some type. Yes, that would give them, potentially jurisdiction to do that, but most of those type of cases are kept in state court. So I believe it'll stay here in Colorado. I guess are we not getting that many questions? It seems like definitely get a lot more on YouTube, don't we?
Feds got the case.
I can't. It's hard to tell here.
I think you might have to restart your computer.
Refresh it, maybe. All right. So anyway, a quick reset. We're obviously giving Facebook a try today due to the arbitrary and capricious nature of YouTube, which will more than likely get me even further suspended on YouTube by criticizing them. But it's a fact. They took us down over a little dispute over a video. And so hopefully we'll be back shortly. But the mere fact that it's the way they went about it, and of course you cannot get anybody to talk to, we will not be defeated. We will bring you Crime Talk one way or the other. And we wanted to come live, obviously, today, just given the discovery of Gannon Stauch, because a lot of people have questions about that case. And obviously, it's frankly, it's interesting and it's intriguing, and it's unfortunate that it has to involve the death of a young child. But that's reality, unfortunately, and it's we're going to bring you the information, and whether YouTube or Facebook wants to demonetize us because we talk about things that are basically talked about on the evening news, but in greater detail. And they just have a thing for anything Crime Talk related, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. But hey, it's their channel or it's their company. They can do what they want. We'll try to stay within their guidelines as much as possible. The other thing that I want to talk about. Oh, you have some point? Case by case. Oh, so the question is the whole issue related to the coronavirus going to possibly push the court dates for Letitia Stauch back? I would say undoubtedly yes. I can tell you from personal experience, the courts here in Colorado are confused at best. They're making it up as they go along, and I get that. This is completely an unprecedented situation that we're dealing with. I've never had to deal with anything like this. I remember after 9/11, things were a little weird, but I don't recall courts being canceled or rescheduled. For lack of a better term, the machine carried on. It just kept going. Now we have the Chief Justice of the Colorado Supreme Court who has issued orders stating that basically there's no jury trials going on, civil, which is frankly not that big of a deal. They're not going to call in jurors for anything like that. And that when possible, there shouldn't be any jury trials on criminal cases unless there are speedy trial issues. We've talked about this before. Everybody has a right to a speedy trial because we do not hold people in custody indefinitely before we get them to court. It's just fundamental fairness. And no matter what, even in times of crises, the Constitution does not get suspended. Even in the Civil War, the Supreme Court rejected many things that President Abraham Lincoln did because it was a violation of the Constitution. You can't just, not do things because you don't want to. It's Constitution. And if you can't prove the case, then they got to let the people go. I can tell you right now, there is, for lack of a better term, in a courthouse out in Brighton, Colorado, Adams County, where I was just the other day, each jurisdiction, the chief judge of the Colorado Supreme Court has said, basically continue stuff. No jury trials are going to go on. But at the same time, each judicial district, I think we have 22 judicial districts here in the state of Colorado, it's complete piecemeal. A couple of them are completely shut down, and they continue everything automatically. Other courts are piecemealing things. I had one in Adams County the other day where they reset automatically, and they said, "Oh, no, your client, we don't like what he did, so he's got to come to court." They didn't say that, but you can read between the lines. Why was he's a special case, so to speak. And so there's no rhyme or reason what's going on here. And it's nothing. It's not just here in the state of Colorado, but in states everywhere, even the federal courts. The federal courts are shut down, where they're not allowing anybody in the courthouse unless you have official business to be there. I have an argument before the 10th Circuit in May, and I don't even know if we're going to be able to do that yet. Who knows? I don't think anybody knows. And this is, like I said, it's unprecedented. I can't remember anything like this in my lifetime, nor in my legal career where things have been affected. I would predict that the Letitia Stauch case will be continued. We already knew that it was continued at one point, or the 35-day rule was waived, and they were going to come back for basically a status conference to see where things stand. Then they're going to set a preliminary hearing. Ms. Stauch is in custody. She can have a hearing by statute within 35 days. Even if there's a epidemic, pandemic going on, she could still say, I want my hearing. And they would have to get people there. I was in court the other day because let's do this thing. But her attorneys are, made some, comments that they needed more time. They're going to need time to do it. At this point, everybody's got a whole lot of time on their hands. I would be charging forward full steam ahead. And I'm telling you, in just about, the easiest success I've had in winning homicide cases is when you go on a first trial setting. Like I said, in the state of Colorado, they have 6 months from the arraignment date where you say not guilty or guilty. When you say not guilty, you can set it for trial. Everybody believes on a murder case, this is going to get continued one time. My theory is I always charge ahead. I try to go on the first setting because prosecution is never ready on the first setting because they think the defense is going to ask for a continuance to drag stuff out. There's a lot of defense attorneys out there that think, time never hurt a case. Sometimes that's correct. But if you don't think that the prosecution can be ready and move on it, then that's what you have to do. Case in point, I was in federal court a couple of weeks ago. For those of you who watch regularly, we had kind of a little gap because I was in trial. Speedy trial issues. Judge set the date. Let's do it. Prosecution wasn't particularly ready, and that helped. But when they indict you in federal court, they know that your client has a right to his trial within 70 days. And when they indict you, they're basically saying, we're up and ready to go. Let's go to trial at that date. And they're not ready. So anyway, Letitia Stauch, I think she's absolutely, this thing is going to get delayed for lots of reasons. There's going to be a ton of investigation going on. We'll see. Let's see. Didn't she drive to Myrtle Beach? She didn't have time to make a quick stop in the Panhandle and jump back on highway. But there's going to be some, unless she had no cell phone or something with her, we'll have to wait and see. Maybe she did it on the way down there. Who knows? She's given the presumption of innocence, and, we can talk about it, but, we need to wait until we get more facts. All we know is she's charged. We know there's video of contradicting her story. And now, obviously, young Gannon's body has been recovered. So to say that, she absolutely drove that way, I can't say that. I don't have any information to back that up, so we're not going to do that. Let me take a quick sip here. Oh, quick shameless plug. Hey, that's right. Drinking our morning Red Bull today from my Crime Talk mug. Let's talk about a mug that you could get if you wanted to. If you were to go to our YouTube page or our web page at ScottReisch.com, the links are there. You go to Teespring, and they will ship you a mug rather quickly at a reasonable price, I might add. And, well, it's not like I've quit my day job because I'm selling mugs, but a lot of people like my mug, and if they want the mug, they can get this one, or they can get this little design. It's up to them. It's completely up to them, if you choose to do so. Okay, jumping from one case we've talked about the other, Lori Vallow case. Obviously, Lori Vallow is a woman in Idaho who has a lot of children or a lot of family members missing, her adopted children, her biological child. Not to mention her brother, her husband, and she's on husband number 5, Mr. Chad Daybell, and she still remains in custody on a $1 million bond, even though her bond was originally set at $5 million and then was then reduced. So apparently, obviously, Chad Daybell does not like Lori Vallow as much as he did in Hawaii. Obviously, sometimes distance makes the heart grow fonder, but maybe he figured, hey, this is not what I signed up for, and I'm not going to blow my insurance policy that I recovered for my deceased wife. I think it's some $350,000 or something to that effect. On attorney's fees, because Lori Vallow has had a couple of attorneys bail. She has one that's remaining, but I think 2 got off this past week. My guess is it's a financial thing. I wouldn't surprise me if we see that Lori Vallow will be appointed a public defender or an attorney at state expense here rather shortly. Just a premonition that I have. I've seen these kinds of situations play out many, many times where people think they have money, then they do not appreciate or realize the cost associated with a case such as let's face it. They've charged abandonment in the Lori Vallow's case, that she's not caring for her children, but really it's a homicide case. And obviously the simplest way to get out of this is if the children were alive, would simply say, there they are, and what's the big deal? I've explained everything. But let's assume, for the sake of argument, and obviously giving Ms. Vallow the presumption of innocence, how would you defend her? Well, the prosecution has the burden in that particular case, and we went over the elements, I guess it was last week or 2 weeks ago, about the charges, that basically that she has been unable to provide support and that she's abandoned these children. Well, the question then becomes, why is the prosecution not, what are they going to do? What evidence are they going to have to present? Well, they're going to have to present that the family members made a report and that they can't find the children, and that they went to Lori Vallow and she was unable to produce the children. As her defense attorney, if I were, and I'm not, nor do I plan on being, but I think on any silence that she elicited, that she was represented by counsel during those times, everything should have gone through her attorney. And I think the argument's going to come down to, how can you use her non-cooperation or silence against her? You're not. You have a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. But I think that the court will ultimately allow something of that in, because otherwise, what does the prosecution have? We asked her to produce her children, and she hasn't. But now we've accused her of a crime, and she has a lawyer, so she can't say anything. She had a lawyer early on in the case. So everything should have gone through them. So anything that they try to infer, there's some circumstantial evidence that she moved some items to a storage shed. But I think the defense will take some sort of tact that these children were, in fact, runaways, that the older child, Ty Lee, took JJ or whatever to get out of there, and that she did not abandon any children, that they ran away. You have to look at the elements as to what they have to prove, and they have to prove abandonment. And she can say, I didn't abandon them. Now, why would you not report your children missing? Why would you not want them back? Why were you not out conducting the search for your children versus, apparently looking for them in Hawaii? Not a good defense. It's kind of like an OJ defense. I'm going to find the true killer. I'm going to begin that search on every golf course in Florida to see where she is. I think Lori Vallow's in a bad spot. She's going to need some good attorneys to get it done, whether they're at state expense or she retains an attorney. But these attorneys have, they're going to have an uphill battle, no doubt. However, you just never know what a jury will do. If they follow the instructions, we'll see. I think it is interesting that her husband's not ponying up all of his life insurance money to help pay for those attorneys. I mean, a good case like that, billing by the hour, by the end of the day, it could be a few $100,000. Most people don't have that kind of money, and if they have it, do they want to spend it on even, apparently his wife that he hasn't really known that long and only been married to, and since they've been married, he's had nothing but trouble. He's probably like, get me out of here. So apparently he doesn't love her enough to spend any of his money on her. So we'll have to wait and see. But I think Lori Vallow's in trouble, and defense attorneys just simply have to show that she didn't abandon anybody. But kind of that consciousness of guilt. Why would she run off to Hawaii? Is that where she's conducting the search for her children if they've in fact run away? So yeah, is it Starlene Birch? I think the police and FBI have been building evidence against Lori. I totally agree with that. I think they're completely looking for what they can do. They're all working in together. We'll just have to wait and see. That's weird how I have to refresh this to get the comment.
There's not a ton rolling in.
Yeah.
It's kind of slow.
Okay.
We got a lot of people watching though.
What are we up to?
Like 150.
Oh, nice. All right. And so, like I said, the other matter that I wanted to talk about today, and I don't know if this interests some people, but I think this is absolutely criminal, and that these individuals should be prosecuted. And these are members of Congress who cashed out their stock portfolio to avoid taking losses in the stock market plunge related to the Ebola virus. And it is criminal, in my opinion. And if the Department of Justice and the United States attorneys do not prosecute these 4 senators for dumping millions of stock based upon this information, I do not know why then we even need a Department of Justice, or just basically say if you're in public office, apparently you get a break. And so this first senator was this Senator Richard Burr, from North Carolina. And anybody from North Carolina should be telling Mr. Senator Burr to resign. So now in 2012, a law was passed. It's called the Stock, S-T-O-C-K, Act of 2012. And that acronym stands for Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge. And basically people thought there was an issue about people in Congress, their family, trading on information about who's going to get contracts. Was there going to be a pandemic? And trying to benefit financially from these this access and this information that they have. And so information's come out that Senator Burr, who's on the Intelligence Committee, had a briefing early on in February, and then proceeded to dump stocks totaling over $1 million. And coincidentally, they just happened to be stocks that were related to the travel industry. So obviously he was told or decided that, hey, it wouldn't be a good idea to be in those stocks anymore, and dumped them. Well, then we have a couple of other senators as well. We have California Senate Democrat Dianne Feinstein. Then we have Republicans Richard Burr, Kelly Loeffler, and James Inhofe. And this is not a Republican or Democrat thing. This is just everybody should be held to the same standard. I truly believe we need term limits. That's just me talking. And that each and every one of these senators who dumped their stock needs to be prosecuted. And the recovery that needs to take place is what they would have lost. Because I don't know about you, but I looked at my stock portfolio, and it's nothing overly dramatic, but it was worth about 50% less than it was just a few weeks ago. And if I had been told about this information, I probably would have taken action as well. But nobody else, I don't think anybody anticipated what this pandemic was bringing and the effects that it was going to have on the economy. Senator Loeffler dumped $3.1 million. And this was the day the Senate Health Committee, which she sits on, was briefed by the Center for Disease Control. Now, both Feinstein dumped as much stock up to $6 million. And Loeffler and Feinstein are saying that, well, our stuff's in a blind trust. We just didn't know anything about it. I don't handle those trades. And my response to that would be BS, all right? There are no coincidences in politics. And these politicians knew that information. And I hope the Department of Justice gets their phone records to see who they called immediately after their briefings and who they talked to, put their family members under oath, their stockbrokers under oath, and find out what the hell happened. These types of coincidences, these people aren't that lucky that they said, I think today I'm going to get out of all these travel stocks and I'm going to make all this money. So they need to go. They all need to go, and they need to be prosecuted. And like I said, this is not a political thing. We've tried to stay away from politics as far as we can. This is just criminal what took place, because I guarantee you, ladies and gentlemen, if you traded on insider information like that, you would be prosecuted and you would be disgorged of any profits that you made. And these senators knew what they were doing. I guarantee it. They got out, and now they're trying to say, what's his name? Burr. He's saying, well, I'll have the Senate Ethics Committee investigate me. Yeah. And in 6 years, we'll get a report saying it was poor judgment. He probably should have timed it, but we don't find anything. Yeah. You got your friends investigating you because they're probably doing the exact same thing. The Department of Justice needs to do it, get the information, charge it, let a jury decide whether these people have violated their oath of office, violated the law under the Stock Act, not to trade on insider information. It's total BS. If this would happen to you or me, we would be charged immediately. And we'll see if the Department of Justice will go after somebody in the political class, the political elite. These people need to be doing it better and cleaner than everybody else. You shouldn't profit while you're in public service. I said this at the start of the show. These people need to work for $1 a year, and if they can't afford through their own resources to live on that, then go into the private sector. We don't need career politicians. We don't need people that their only job has been, I'm a politician. No, we need people that have been successful in life, that are there for public service, that don't need the money, and they're going to do it for the good of the country, the good of their constituents, and not to have them profit or their families profit in any way. And I don't know why there's not a division in the Department of Justice that simply sits there. I know they have a public corruptions unit, but why are they not going through every one of these individuals' financial statements and seeing how they're living? And if you if you go in as a pauper and come out as a rich man from your time in public service, that should be per se evidence that you are corrupt, okay? Limit these people to one term. One and you're done. Go away, public service. It used to be judges went to the bench after a successful career in private practice. And it was kind of your retirement tour, your public service to give back because you're kind of a wise old man or woman and you've had that life experience. Now we got people being judges that got 5-6 years of experience. It's crazy. But in the judiciary, if you have stock in a company, you have to recuse yourself. If you have on a case that comes before them, they have to recuse themselves. If they don't think they can be fair and impartial, recuse themselves. And these politicians that take this money, and I've said this before, it's always about the money. Hey, let the politicians take as much money as they want. But guess what? If they take money from a company that affects them, they shouldn't be allowed to vote. They should recuse themselves from voting. And I guarantee you, those companies and those individuals will stop giving money to people because, of course, they give money. They only give money because they expect them to get special treatment. Why is it that somebody can not get an appointment with their senator or congressman because they're too busy? You get an aide that sends out a form letter to you, tells you, oh, this congressman is so busy. But if you're going to make a donation to his PAC or to his campaign, suddenly their time becomes available and free. Anyway, take out the money. It's a rant. It's just irritating as hell. America was founded on the principles that everyone is created equal and justice is blind. Well, the Department of Justice needs to make sure that justice is blind and go after each one of these senators, and their own parties, their own constituents should be asking for their resignations. Now, they won't do it because they have no shame at all. Anyway, that's that. I think that just about covers it. Any questions we should respond to before we go, Kyle? Sorry about that. Man, it just irritates me. Public service should be public service. Because my clients, when they have to go do public service, guess how much money they make from it? Zero, right? In fact, it costs them money because they have to go away from usually a paying job, and they have to pay to get the workers' comp insurance. So if they get hurt doing public service, they're covered. So these public servants who are out there saying they're just doing it for their constituents are a bunch of liars, and they all just need to go away. One and done. The country will survive without career politicians. Thanks. Anything we need to talk about before we sign off here? Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for watching. This has been Crime Talk, our adventure on Facebook. We will save this, assuming everything went correct, and upload it onto YouTube today as well. But I appreciate you taking the time and refresh my screen is what somebody's telling me. Taking the time to join us today. We know this couldn't be possible without you. And I think overnight we went past that 85,000 mark, which is absolutely amazing and humbling. And we thank every one of you for watching. We know that this wouldn't be possible without all of you. And we try to put out good content and make it better every day. I assure you, we think about it all the time. How can we make this better? So thank you. Oh, yeah. And we'll try to do a big project at 90,000. So we're close. It'll be here soon. Thanks for watching. Crime Talk. Have a great weekend and stay safe. Social distancing, wash your hands. Just do what your mother would tell you to do. All right? Have a good day.